Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Leibowitz. And originally, I was going to have the great Jim Valliant on to talk about executive orders and such, but I'm in a lousy mood and I'd like to step out of that or snap out of it. So I've decided that we're going to talk about the transformative power of objectivism. Jim has obliged, even though that is not what he prepared for. And by the way, Jim is an objectivist, a former prosecutor. He is the author of the books behind him, Creating Christ and The Passion of Ayn Rand's Critics. He's a great friend of mine and a wonderful guy. Jim, welcome back, and thank you for agreeing to the change in topics.
No problem, sir. Always happy to be here. You're a great guy, and I'm proud to say a friend of mine. So happy to talk about whatever helps you get out of your funk, my brother.
There's something interesting that in OPAR, the Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, Leonard Peikoff agrees with Hegel in saying the truth is one, meaning, nothing can contradict any other part. Every truth implies every other. And there's something interesting that happened in my personal transformation. One was I discovered Ayn Rand. Two, I discovered Dr. Stanton Samanow in his book, The Inside the Criminal Mind. And I found such a compatibility between the two in terms of reason is your guide, take responsibility for your actions, have integrity. You have to have an unbreached integrity. The only thing that I found that was missing from Samanow's sort of scheme was he and Samuel Yockelson, with whom he wrote the 3-volume set, The Criminal Personality, they talked about how theirs was a moral program. But I noticed that they didn't have a moral system, which Ayn Rand, of course, provided, and it worked well for me. But when I got out of prison, and this is kind of the truth is one thing, I didn't know how many objectivists were attracted to the work of Stanton Samanow. And it was really like refreshing for me that I independently, it wasn't recommended to me by any objectivist, but found the same guy came to the same conclusions as many objectivists. That's kind of my long-winded way of saying that objectivism helped me immensely to become a better person, along with the aforementioned Dr. Stanton Samanow. So the first thing I want to address here about the transformative power is this. One of the criminal thinking errors that Dr. Samanow discusses is concrete thinking, in that criminals view each situation as if it's something anew. It's very concrete. And I've seen this in groups where a guy, I'm not going to sell heroin anymore. I'm going to sell coke. I'm not going to sell coke anymore. I'm going to sell weed. I'm not going to sell on 8th Street. I'm going to sell on 5th Street. And he doesn't understand that the principle is you're putting yourself in a remarkably risky situation that's ultimately going to get you arrested, right? It's the failure to think in principle. And in Ayn Rand, the first of the named values is reason. And reason entails conceptualizing, thinking in principle, induction. So with that as the sort of opening for you, Jim, explain to me as somebody who is not a criminal, but somebody whose own life has been benefited from objectivism, why enshrining reason is the basic starting point of the self-improvement endeavor.
Well, to use my own example, how it transformed me. I was, before I read Ayn Rand, I was a child of the 20th century. And so I believed in science. Let me put it that way. I thought, how cool is this science business? And I had a dad who was a scientist and an engineer, and that really helped solidify the value of it. But I didn't know the parameters. There's this heart thing. So you got to find a balance between the head and the heart. Maybe reason doesn't answer everything. Maybe sometimes I've got to rely on my instinct or my intuition, or maybe I should, when I have doubts, maybe I should go by tradition, by the way other people have been doing it all along. And so how do we know anything? Well, Some things I would put into the category, the box of reason. Okay, that's a reason question. Like physics or biology might give us it's medicine or engineering. Well, geez, reason should be by what we go by. Ethics. I was raised to be a young Christian. It was a moderate liberal kind of American Christianity in the 20th century, but nonetheless, it was no. There's a shelf where reason doesn't go. There's stuff that reason can't reach, and we have to be principled about everything, including reason. How do I know anything? And what Ayn Rand convinced me of was that reason is our only means of knowing anything beyond immediate sense perception, which is no analysis of it, no concepts, no theories, no propositions. All of that world of principles is the world that reason must control. Our only means of knowing. If an idea pops into my head, ghost, unicorn, that does not oblige reality to contain ghosts or unicorns. For everything I believe, for every proposition that I claim to know, I've got to submit it to the acid test of reason. Are there any negative examples of this principle? Does this cover all of it? Coming back to what you first said, the truth is one, the truth is the whole, depending on how you want to translate Hegel. We believe, Ayn Rand believed, that no concept was valid, as her hero John Galt and Atlas Shrugged said. No concept is valid unless it can be integrated without contradiction into the rest of our knowledge. And so, since there is no automatic knowledge, and since my feelings can lead me astray, I can't rely on my feelings, my emotions. If I rely on my emotions, every time I got really, really pissed off at someone, I'd punch them in the face. Well, that doesn't do me any good, really, in the long run. It subjects me to danger. I could go to jail, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not thinking through the situation. So when it comes to my actions, when it comes to my beliefs, reason has to be supreme. It's got to be grounded in observation because there is no automatic knowledge. I've got to be able to reduce all of my beliefs to the evidence of the senses. Direct observation has got to ground everything. And when I build up from observation, I've got to go by logic, inductive and deductive logic, rendering all of my conceptual and abstract knowledge into a consistent, unified, logical whole. So observation and logic. She defined reason, Ayn Rand, as the faculty that integrates and identifies the material provided by man's senses. That's a really good definition. And I realized, boy, if it doesn't match reason, I can't entertain it as true. In fact, I've got to eliminate whim altogether, the arbitrary altogether from my cognition, from my thinking. So that everything I believe, everything I claim to know has got to be integrated logically, consistently with all the rest of what I know. Reason has to be supreme because the question is, how do I know anything? How do I know anything? That is not to diminish the role of emotions. Emotions are our motivators. Emotions are our rewards. And so using my emotions properly, giving my emotions full play in its lane and keeping emotion out of the lane of cognition is the important thing. Emotions themselves, while they can be evidence for me, my own psychological state, for example, they're not a means of cognition like reason is. Reason is the only way of knowing and keeping myself connected to reality. I know how observation connects me to reality. How does a Ouija board do it? How does ESP do it? It's magic in effect. It's causeless in effect. So observation connects me to reality, and logic keeps my ideas connected to reality. You want some other means? Go by emotion, go by tradition, go by popular opinion poll. No, that's going to lead you astray because you don't know how that connects you to reality. It's maybe some socially convenient way, maybe some psychologically convenient way of believing things, but it's not going to be effective because it's not going to tell me the truth about reality. To get the truth about reality, I have to go by reason and only reason.
Yeah, so if I want to improve myself, the only way I can identify my flaws, identify what's going wrong with my life, why I need to change is through reason. The only way to identify what I need to do is through reason, and reason has to have a purpose, right? It doesn't just float in the wind. It has to be directed towards something, which brings us to the second of the three fundamental values, purpose. Now, when I was incarcerated, my purpose mainly was improving myself and in getting out of prison. And since I've gotten out of prison, my purpose has been this podcast, to get this podcast up and going. And what Ayn Rand talks about is the purpose is what you organize everything else around, right? So that this podcast gives me something, stuff that's irrelevant to it, I kind of push to the side. Stuff that I find relevant, I bring in. So the fact that I can use reason to pursue this purpose helps me to eliminate those things in my life that are going to harm me and only bring those things in that are conducive. But it's important that we, probably I got ahead of my skis by not stating initially that discovering that my life is my standard of value, because the purpose that I enact in my life has to be beneficial toward my life. It has to further my life. Otherwise, whatever I do could end up leading to my death, and then I'm done anyway, right? If I don't take my life as my standard, then it's deuces wild.
Well,
So,
reason is
so
not merely our means of knowing, our only means of knowing beyond sense perception. It's also our basic tool of survival, our most fundamental tool of survival. I've got many tools of survival, but all of them depend upon, rely on, or come from reason itself. And reason, the first thing reason tells me is that it's a value, it's my high value, and value itself is grounded in the concept of life. If I divorce the concept of value from life, the concept of value becomes arbitrary, meaningless, undefinable, subjective. And so, of course, humans can't live that way. So they get sucked into some mystic or intrinsic code of values because apparently reason isn't able to do that. And so much of modern philosophy, I mean, this is the legacy of philosophers like David Hume, who said we could never derive an ought from an is. Values are purely subjective. He thought they were grounded in emotion, not realizing that emotions themselves are the psychological product of our values and our evaluations.
that whole is-ought gap, the idea that you can't derive an ought from an first of all, it's not true. Secondly, it's deadly, because if I can never have an ought, well, then I can just do whatever the hell I want, and that is ultimately going to destroy me as well. Now, the next value, and it's not to give purpose a short amount of time, but the next one for me holds a special significance, and that's self-esteem, right? And for this, I really have to thank Dr. Nathaniel Branden, who I know is persona non grata amongst a lot of objectivists, but nevertheless, his essays on self-esteem and the virtue of selfishness and his book, The Psychology of Self-Esteem, helped me enormously. Both to understand what self-esteem is, to understand why I need it, and to understand the deficits in self-esteem that I had. And it becomes clear to me that he defined self-esteem initially as the combination of self-confidence and self-respect, the idea that I'm worthy of living and capable of living. Now, if I don't think I'm worthy of living, then why bother taking the actions necessary to sustain myself? And if I'm not confident that I can do what's necessary to maintain my life, I'm not going to try what I don't think I can do, right? And within that, though, he talks about evasion. And Ayn Rand talked about evasion, and Leonard Peikoff talked about evasion. And also, by the way, Dr. Samanow talked about the importance of facing the truth about yourself. And as painful as it was to look inside myself and see all the flaws I had, all the inadequacies, all the complexes that needed to be addressed, without that honesty, I can never overcome them. And so it goes from being sort of a ugh to wow, because now there's nothing I won't face. And the thing is, it's, even though I understand it, I don't have the connection to it that I once did. When I see other people evading, it bewilders me. Even though I can tell you, if you ask me why do people evade, logically I can put it out there, but I just don't have that emotional connection because there's no desire in me any longer to evade. None. Because there's a great quote from Ayn Rand. I may not get the quote exact, but it's, I'm too afraid to be a coward. I see the results too well. And
Oh,
that's what that reminds me of. But having these three values now, and I'm going to have you to comment on self-esteem in a second, but reason as my guide toward the purpose I choose to fulfill, which ultimately is my own happiness, but the concrete purpose that's going to do that are the relationships, the friendships, but the career that I have as a podcaster, and then the self-esteem that leads me to know I'm worthy to accomplish these things, and that I can accomplish these things. That's transformation. So what are your thoughts on self-esteem?
boy, is that correct. Boy, is that correct. You know, religion does a number on self-esteem. Our families can do a number on our self-esteem. Um, Trying to fit into a group can do a number on our self-esteem. And we don't even get taught the value, the precious, irreplaceable value that our own life represents to each of us. Your life is I mean, you've got this finite life and it has certain specific conditions. And if you don't make the right choices, you can screw up, get injured, have pain, die potentially. No, if your life isn't what it's all about, then what is? And there are dictators in history and kings in history and pharaohs who'd be perfectly happy for you to think nothing of yourself so that you're just a complete schmoo who'd be a slave. No, the ethics of slavery have sort of we're still that still lingers in, you know, we say slavery has been abolished in the Western world. Well, maybe politically we say that slavery is bad, but psychologically we still have those chains. Well, who am I but a cog in the greater engine? What is my purpose? Someone asks, what is the purpose of life? They're actually saying, my life isn't enough, my life isn't worth it, my life is insufficient, is built into the question that there's some grander, greater purpose other than my own life. Nope, sorry, I can't. Just as we were saying before, I can't think of value apart from life. I can't think of purpose apart from my life. Life is an individual thing. There's your life, there's my life, and each of us have to consider it that way. If you don't think yourself worthy of being the purpose, your life being the purpose that sets the agenda for everything else, you're doomed. You're doomed in one way or another to be a suicidal mystic, a political slave, a psychological slave. You've doomed yourself by saying, I'm not worthy. It's not about my life. My life needs some greater end, some greater purpose, some greater meaning. Objectivism rejects that altogether. Your life is its purpose. Life is the standard. The phenomenon of life is what generates values, and value pursuit is such. Life is, in effect, the pursuit of values. My life is my purpose. And so it must be. That's the way, again, as Hero and Atlas Shrugged puts it, that's how it has to be. Life has to be the standard of value, and my life has to be the purpose of all of my value pursuit. And that's what sets a logical hierarchy of values. So that way I know, yeah, friendship is important, all these other things, but they belong in their place. And they're connected, intimately connected to what? My life, the needs of my life. And my life is a worthy end in itself. My life, if I can quote another book by Ayn Rand, Anthem, my life needs no higher aim to justify it. A wonderful line in there. I know not whether this planet is a speck of dust lost in an eternity or the center of the universe. I know not and I care not, because I know what happiness is possible to me, and my happiness needs no higher aim to vindicate it. It is the source of all values, all valuing. And anyone who tries to tell you that no, it's the greater good of society, or no, it's some supernatural being in the sky we have to submit ourselves to and subordinate our values to and subordinate our lives to, is enslaving you, is destroying your life, either slowly on the installment plan or all at once. So yeah, self-esteem is absolutely critical. When you decide I am worthy, Now, of course, we all are at different levels of ability. I'll never be a genius like Ayn Rand, and I can't beat myself up for that. But on the other hand, I am capable of doing enough to support my life and get the values I need. And with a little practice, I get to know that. I get to realize, no, hey, I give myself some short-term goals and some intermediate goals. And then I begin to realize, no, I'm able to do this. I can handle this. I gain confidence. I gain the ability. Not only am I worthy, but guess what? I'm able to. And then suddenly my ability, someone was on the internet the other day complaining, oh gosh, if I could not, it wasn't an objectivist, obviously, but this person was complaining, oh gosh, I hate to go to work. Why do I have to work 40 hours a week? Gosh, what a horrible thing. And I think to myself, no, the act of sustaining my own life has become a joy to me. Has become a joy to me. I've worked in factories, I've worked in bookstores, I've swept floors. And if you do have the correct orientation about your life and what that function of that job is in serving the greater end, your long-term goals and your long-term happiness, your long-term survival ultimately is what it comes down to. But if you have that, then suddenly the very act of staying alive, the very act of achieving values, the very act that gives you that sense of what we might call metaphysical efficacy. I can do it. I can achieve this. And there's a strange thing. It's like we enjoy the practice of it. So we'll play games or we'll play sports or we'll do some side activity which might simply be exercising and flexing those muscles of metaphysical efficacy. Look, I can figure this out. I can do this. I am capable. I am capable of meeting the challenges of life, and I am worthy of it. It's all about my life. There is no greater end for each and every one of us but our own lives. With that framework, it can be utterly transformational because most people are trapped either in some religious framework of thinking, because our ancestors had no way of justifying ethics or political values. They had no way of doing that, and so, but we do need philosophy. It's an absolute necessity. We need to have a frame of reference by which we integrate our knowledge. And if you don't have a rational basis, we're going to make up one. We're going to say, well, it's God's plan or something. And then we get stuck into God's plan as an end in itself. And we get further and further distant from the needs of our life and life on earth here and now. And that is, of course, turning things upside down and inside out. Or we get, oh boy, if a lot of people on the right are sucked into religious things, a lot of people on the left are sucked into a political view, which is in effect a religious perspective for them, because that's what sets the agenda for their values. It's the suffering of people on the other side of the globe that I have to, if there's a single hungry person, if there's a single child in need on this planet, I can't be happy. I've got to do whatever I can to fix all the problems of the world all at once, and because my little life isn't enough. My little life is an insufficient justification for becoming wealthy, making friends, finding the love of my life, enjoying art, finding metaphysical efficacy in playing games. It's that simple. No, when you have a proper self-esteem, it is transformative. The thing that a dictator does not want is a population of people who value their own lives. What he wants is an army of slaves who are willing to commit suicide for his cause. And that's communism, that's Hitler, that's you name it, going all the way, any theocracy you name. And there's a wonderful combination because you see, it's not really a difference between the mystics and the what Ayn Rand called the witch doctors and the Attilas, because they are always allied. They're always two sides of the same coin. You need some kind of philosophical justification to get people to not value their lives and to put something else ahead of their own well-being. Yeah, no, when you truly understand self-esteem in all of its ramifications, and with respect to Nathaniel Branden, when he was alive, because of the way he treated Ayn Rand, he was persona non grata. He's no longer alive. He's persona non est. So, to put it bluntly, so we're in a safe place. We can use his work insofar as it's valuable. For example, his book on the psychology of self-esteem is an astonishing description of human psychology. Up to that point in history, the best description, as far as I'm concerned, of the human psyche. And self-esteem is a critical part of that. Now, he may have overstated it, but he has a wonderful theory that says anxiety, indeed neurosis in general, is one thing, a crisis in self-esteem. See, I can be, if you point a gun at me, I'll get scared and I'll feel rational fear. And so I should feel fear. You know, if I'm up at a dangerous height, I should be afraid. My palms should sweat that I'm at a dangerous height. Because after all, if I take the wrong step, it's all over. But that's a objective, fact-based fear. If I walk into a party and I just have this diffused sense of fear that doesn't escape and keeps bothering me, that's a kind of a fear that I bring with me about myself. Anxiety, anxiety as a psychological phenomenon is an issue of self-esteem, is an issue of self-esteem. And so I come into a party, I feel socially anxious. Gosh, are people going to reject me? Are they going to like me? Are they going to laugh at me? Is that girl over there going to give me the time of day? And so I walk in with social anxiety. What's going on there? It's my sense of self-worth. And you know something? One thing that Ayn Rand and Brandon taught me, you know what's sexier than all hell is confidence. So a guy with self-esteem, suddenly the girls are all turning around and looking at the guy because he has a degree of confidence. He doesn't give a crap what other people think. He's there with his own purpose that he's defined himself, and he knows he's worthy of that purpose. Ooh, suddenly people are attracted to you. You find it easier to make friends. Women are now suddenly interested in you. And so there's a vicious cycle that can go on with a lack of self-esteem, neurosis, and anxiety, or a virtuous cycle that can happen. No, wait a minute. I've decided I am worthy. I am able. That suddenly becomes a virtuous circle in which my confidence makes me better able even to achieve my values in a number of ways, even socially.
Now, there's one primary virtue and 6 derivative virtues in objectivism. And virtues in objectivism are the means to obtaining values. But we don't have time to go through all of them. But there are 2 I want to address. And the first one is pride, which can be defined as moral perfectionism. Now, first of all, moral perfectionism is possible in objectivism because it can't apply to things that aren't possible. It can only apply to things that we can actually get, right? It means basically an unbreached rationality, a desire to never evade, to always be better. Now, importantly is that the idea that it's a means to gaining values. So the better I am morally, all things considered equal, the more things I can accomplish in my life, right? This is something that I got to admit is a little difficult for me. And what I mean is this, that we are so trained to think of ethics in terms of duties. And I was just reading again Causality versus Duty, Ayn Rand's excellent essay in Philosophy, Who Needs It? In my view, it might be her best essay on ethics. But she talks about how the proponent of duty ethics is always looking in, or what does this say about me, rather than looking outward. What can I achieve? What can I accomplish? What can I do? And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make with ethics, only because, I mean, our whole culture, and maybe the whole world, the predominant idea of ethics is it's this thing imposed on you from outside that you have to obey. But Ayn Rand says, no, all you lose, if you're going to be unethical, you lose the value that you could have gotten.
Exactly right.
That's the problem. And so this moral perfection thing is of the utmost importance.
Yes,
We ought to want to be morally perfect, because what that means is we're in the best position to obtain the things in life that we want, right?
exactly right.
That's it. But I have to admit, and I had this conversation with Don Watkins about a year ago. I had him on the show because we talked about it, that this is a mistake that a lot of people, a lot of well-intentioned people make. And I remember, I don't do it as much anymore, but when I first started to study objectivism and was convinced that life was the standard of value, I looked at it like, okay, I have to do this. This is in my interest. as if it was a duty-bound ethics, which of course it is not.
Yeah, what a see, interesting. There are people who read Objectivism and read Ayn Rand's ethics, because Ayn Rand was a moral philosopher. She wasn't one of these people who, when they reject religion, throw out the whole of ethics in effect and become subjectivists or hedonists or go by what feel. Because Hume himself, when he said, if you can't derive an ought from an is, then really my values are all a slave to my passions. In fact, the whole quest of ethics is reduced to, well, it's a statement. It's in effect a backwards way of just really asserting my emotional preferences, one way or another. They're a slave to my emotions. They're a slave to my bodily needs. Well, that's not true in one sense, very not true. But it is, and it is a philosophical thing, and most people can't really live the Hume way, and so it's the Stoics who tell us, well, it's this internal sense of satisfaction. It isn't an outward looking thing, because after all, we can't control the world around us, and all I can do is be content with whatever meager lot the world gives to me. Still worse is Christianity, where it says this life is nothing, sacrifice yourself for the next dimension. Or Kant, intention is everything, duty is everything. It doesn't matter, consequences are absolutely irrelevant. The deontologist says consequences are irrelevant to morality. Intention is all that matters. Having your heart right is all that matters. So if our ethicists, if the moral thinkers of the past, like Stoics or Christians or Kantians, are telling us exactly the opposite of what Ayn Rand is saying there, it's your life is what it's all about. It's what you can achieve, and what you can achieve is the important part here. Perfection has to be possible. If someone comes to you and says, and this goes back to Plato, who, of course, nothing in this world, you, me, or even a triangle or a line can't be perfect in this material world, because it's not living up to the perfect reflection of the form of the good in this supernatural dimension, in effect. No, trained by Plato and Christianity, we believe perfection is impossible. And so that diffuses any kind of ambition right there, moral ambitiousness, which is what pride is. Moral ambitiousness is predicated on the notion that perfection is possible. Perfection has to be possible. Why do I say that? Otherwise, you're blaming me. You're saying I'm imperfect for something I can't control. Well, no. If we're
I'm
talking,
glad you said moral ambitiousness. I think I called it moral perfectionism
well, no, I
earlier.
like that term too, because it's the same thing.
It is,
In
but
fact,
moral ambitiousness was the word I was looking for, term I was
yeah,
looking
if
for.
perfection isn't possible, then of course we destroy our motivation to ever improve, because that is within the range of possibility. And just blame me for something I couldn't control, to blame me for something that I couldn't achieve, is to blame me for being born in the 20th century, or being like a racist, to blame you for the race that you were born in. No, 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 that's nothing to do with ethics. It is beyond your control. That which is beyond your control is not your moral fault or moral credit, by the way. But if all the ethics is me doing the very best, straining myself, I'm not flashing myself on the back, but doing the best I can in context, that is moral perfection. And what is that? That is a quest for constant improvement. That's a quest for constant learning and growing. It's the unlimited vista that is ahead of me. I'll never be omniscient. No, no. But guess what? I can improve my knowledge. And by improving my knowledge the best I can, I am being perfect. By applying that knowledge as best as I can, I am being perfect. And is it a constant effort? Absolutely. But it's an effort I can do, I can achieve. People confuse, for example, one of the things she says in that causality versus duty essay, which is so brilliant, people will confuse sacrifice with the paying a high price for a high value. That's not sacrifice. Being long term, surrendering surrendering the short term gain is not a sacrifice at all, if it's in the quest of it was the rational quest of a long term gain. So things like discipline or delayed gratification or putting in the effort to work out my mind, work out my body, make sure I'm capable that is all part of this lifelong, and we have to think in terms of a whole lifetime. If my life is my purpose, then I have to think in terms of a whole lifetime, or I'm letting my future self down, and I don't want to do that. Selfishness is really the real powerful motivator there, right? People say, without God, why be ethical? Your life, your happiness. And I can think of no higher, more powerful motivator than my long-term actual self-interest. And this is where people get screwed up on the very concept of selfishness or rational self-interest. We're talking, very few people actually even stop to think what in fact is in fact in my long-term best interest. No, they think of selfishness as going by random emotions, whim worshiping, satisfying some immediate pleasure. If I were to just go out and try and have as much sex as possible and smoke weed every day, and okay, I am not being selfish. Actually, am I? I'm not achieving the highest value I can have in a human relationship or in my productive life. What I'm doing is I'm surrendering that for some short-term emotional pleasure, or avoidance of pain, which is what it really ultimately comes down to. So no, you have to be rational, you have to be purposeful, and you have to believe yourself worthy and able of doing it. And that's why those are the three supreme values for Ayn Rand. They set the agenda, if you will, for the rest of ethics. And Ayn Rand's various principles in ethics are centered on achieving our long-term self-interest. And so she'll have a principle of honesty, for example, but it's not going to be like Kant's principle that says, tell the truth no matter what. You can never tell a lie. Even if you're hiding Jews during World War II, the Nazis come knocking at the door. You have to say, okay, yeah, I'm hiding Jews. Yeah, Anne Frank is in the attic. You'll find a little girl up there in the attic. No, you lie. You say, Jews? I don't know any Jews. What the hell are you talking about? There are circumstances in which it's okay to lie, in which the conditions which make the normal rule never, don't tell a lie, it makes sense. I don't tell a lie because of my fidelity to my own life, because of my fidelity to reality. Only reality can be a value to me at the end of the day. So any attempt to gain a value by faking it to myself or others is going to be doomed, fraught with its own internal self-destruct mechanism. I can't really gain a value by faking reality. So I'm on principle committed to reality. Now, if you're going to point a gun in my head and say I'm going to take a value away from you by force, unless now tell the truth. No, I will lie. And for the same reason that I tell the truth the rest of the time, I will lie when someone is trying to forcibly take an important value from me. It makes it perfectly okay to lie for the very same reason that I tell the truth most of the time. In fact, honesty is not really always telling the truth, because sometimes you don't have to say anything. You don't owe anyone, just because they walk up and ask you a question, the truth. You can just remain silent and walk away. Yeah, walk away. You don't have to say a damn thing. The point is, though, that only reality can be of value to me. And so I have a principled commitment to reality. That's what I call honesty. That will mean that on certain relatively rare occasions, I may have to tell a lie to a Nazi. Yeah. So I don't get caught up in this intrinsicism crap. And I don't kill myself or beat myself up for, oh, I'm now in this Sophie's choice position. Do I tell the truth and remain true to my duty to be honest, right? Or do I actually spare my values lives? No, I'm going to lie in that case to save the life of Anne Frank upstairs in the attic, okay? Because life is my value. And it would be, in effect, a lack of fidelity to reality to tell the truth to the Nazi who's out to wipe out Jews, you see. Happiness is possible, but it's really only possible, if you think about it, to a person who thinks like this. If I were to pursue, immediate short-term pleasure over my long-term actual needs, if I were to sacrifice my true selfishness in the long run, in fact, my self-interest, for some near-term emotional or physical satisfaction, then I'm not being selfish at all, and I can't really achieve values. No. The greatest happinesses, the greatest moments of joy I've had in my life are, and this is talk about a transformational thing. I started out my life with a corrupt view of ethics and self-esteem, the product of Christianity. If it weren't for Ayn Rand, I would still be stuck in this self-flagellation mode where I'm not worthy, and I'll never be worthy at that rate, and I'll never be happy at that rate. No, the greatest happinesses of my life have been long-term achievements. I make myself into being a prosecutor. I made myself into good prosecutor. Good trial lawyers aren't just born, they're made. And guess what? They're self-made. It requires education. It requires a lot of learning. It requires a degree of discipline. It requires practice, so that, the rules of court and judicial procedures are automatized into my head. And now I am a tool. Now I am this sharpened instrument for achieving justice. And so I can take on a very difficult and complex case. And at the end of that difficult and complex case, I get a murder conviction, and I spared the community from this murderer and protected the community from this murderer and got justice for my victim, by the way. I have this enormous sense of self satisfaction that is unlike anything else. I achieved a difficult thing, a good thing. I saved my values. I helped make the world around me a place where other people could achieve their values in peace. And that's how I looked at being a prosecutor. I've made it so that everyone else can achieve their values, both their personal values, their professional values, their whole life. They don't have to worry so much about the thugs and the murderers getting in their way or stopping them. I'm making the community safe for value pursuit. Or in my personal life, if I were to just sleep with, just go for as many notches on the bedpost, as many orgasms as I can
Oh
muster
my
up,
gosh.
that would be the absolute wrong way to approach human relationships. In fact, being demanding, judging people carefully based on all these values I'm talking about here, so that I respond to virtue. What I'm responding to you with, Michael, is the fact that you're a virtuous human being, and so the contemplation of you is actually a value to me. And in fact, it's important to me that you are virtuous. Otherwise, you won't be able to see my virtue, and any praise or connection that we make, any fun we have, just as friends. If we go to, the Air and Space Museum and have fun, any fun we have is now just got a little asterisk next to it. It's not, no. But if we are equals in virtue, then every moment is ours completely. Yours as a whole being, mine as a whole being. And it's a reflection of both of our virtues. And now I can let go and really enjoy myself. You'll notice people can't just let go and enjoy themselves if they don't have a good sense of self-esteem. Self-esteem is necessary just for the frivolous joys in life, I would say, which aren't so frivolous, because we need that kind of fun and enjoyment in life as well. But in what I consider my romantic life, the highest relationship in my life is my wife of 28 years now. I was very demanding, very selective. I got into a point where maybe I won't find the woman for me. Maybe I won't find a long-term life mate. And it was at that moment, of course, that she appears. But I'm still skeptical, and I still say, take it slow, Jim. Make sure this is right. Make sure that she's the one. And she was. And that careful investment in understanding human nature, that careful being demanding about who it is I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, has paid off incredible dividends. And as we have gotten closer and closer and closer and come to understand each other better and better over the years, the value of that relationship becomes all the greater. Now, everything she says to me, is a reflection of all that she knows about me, all that we've shared together, all the virtues that I am as a being, and all the virtues that she is as a being. No, whether it's work or human relationships or just having fun, my long-term well-being requires that my hierarchy of values is set by these three principal values: reason, purpose, and self-esteem. It becomes, absolutely transformative. Can you imagine? You approach the ordinary person this way, they don't think of life in those terms. They don't think of themselves in those terms, or with that kind of proper valuing of their own life and their own being, their own long-term self-interest. When you've got that in mind, then suddenly everything falls into its proper place, and each value is enjoyed completely and without contradiction. And so Ayn Rand calls happiness a state of non-contradictory joy. There's no little hooks on it, no little asterisks, and well, but yeah, but yeah, but well, and kind of no kindness, no buts. Yes, I'm worthy of this.
Jim, the last virtue that I want to talk about is integrity. Integrity is very powerful, right? Now, in objectivism, it's defined as loyalty to rational principles. But the standard dictionary definition is just loyalty to a code or loyalty to a moral code. And there's just something about integrity. I remember maybe 20 years ago now, maybe less than that, 18 maybe. And a woman said to me, I was having a conversation with a volunteer in the prison, and I told her, I said, I'm surprised none of these guys punch me in the face. I said, because I'm straight up with everybody. And she told me, Michael, whether they know it or not, people respect integrity. And I'm thinking about two characters in two separate books. One is, I can't remember his name, but he's the leader of the Royalists in 93 by Victor Hugo. And this guy, there's another guy who botched the cannonade below deck. He let it loose and it broke holes in the ship and everything. But then the guy risked his life and saved it. So this other guy, the guy that I'm saying has the integrity, brings the guy up on deck, gives him a medal for his courage, and then shoots him and throws him overboard for what he did. And the other guys on the ship say, we found our leader. And despite the brutality of it, there's the integrity of that person, that his commitment to what he believes, that it inspires awe when you're reading about it. Or the character Andre in We the Living. That was his name, right? I got it right. Andre. He's a communist, but he has integrity, and there's just something about it that you might think he's wrong, but you say, wow, right? Now, in objectivism, thank goodness, it is loyalty to rational principles. And by being loyal to those rational principles, we bring the whole thing back. And again, it goes with the moral perfectionism, the moral ambitiousness. It allows us to accomplish more, both in terms, I would say, of being capable of value pursuit, but also in our dealings with other people. Because when people deal with a man with integrity or a woman with integrity, they know you're trustworthy. They know if you tell them, I'm going to be here at 6, you're going to be here at 6. Now a world opens to you. On the show Shark Tank, for instance, there's one of the sharks, Damon John. And the second, Brent McCall pointed this out to me years ago, the second he sees a moral failing in one of the contestants, he's out. And the thing is, I'm thinking, well, he might be wrong, but he doesn't care. He's not wasting his time on that. He knows from experience that you have to deal with people of integrity. And so take us out, Jim, with a requiem to integrity.
You brought up fiction, and it's not accidental, about the transformative power of philosophy. One of the key links to understanding moral principles, and this is how we define integrity as objectivists, is consistency and loyalty to rational principles. I want to see that in action. I want to be inspired by seeing that in action. So even, as you point out, even if I disagree with the values of the character, seeing his loyalty to values, his devotion to his best understanding of what those values require. Yeah, I'll give him a medal, but then I'll also kill him. That kind of integrity to your values, it's because life is all or nothing. It is. Life is life. It seems redundant to say life is life and death, but moral principles are life and death. And if we don't understand, if we have some other purpose to our principles or something, we don't understand them. That's why, if our principles are geared towards our life, I might make a mistake along the way, but you could correct me at least and say, well, Jim, that's not the proper principle. Okay, I'll make an adjustment to my principle, but I'm going to be fiercely loyal to principles.
More importantly, you can correct it, Jim.
I can correct. Yes, exactly. I can correct it. If and that's the thing. If life is my standard, at least I know how to get the correct principles. But as you point out, adherence to principle is itself absolutely vital. That's why life has to be the standard of our values. That's why my own life has to be its purpose. If that's the case, then integrity to values becomes like Howard Rourke. For him, saying no to compromise is easy because he absolutely, like Ayn Rand, he knows the consequences of that kind of cowardice and lack of integrity. It would be cashing in on everything that he stands for. It would be totally denying he's now a prostitute and a slave to the whims of others. No, no, no. That's the character that taught me about integrity. And it really drove, and that's the great value of fiction with heroes too. They show you in real life an embodiment. Now, when I was a teenager and I read it, I don't think I really understood integrity, and I'm not sure I had. I think I had a degree of it, but how I identified with it was, that's the best part of me. The best part of me is this unyielding commitment to what I know is right. And so I'm being interviewed to be hired as a prosecutor, and they push me into morally difficult, trolley moral situations and all kinds of other moral situations. But my bottom line is I'm doing the right thing. I don't care if I lose my job. I don't care if this embarrasses the elected DA. I don't care if, right? I'm immune to every other consequence, right? You say, well, isn't that deontological? No, because the one consequence I know has to be the thing that governs it all is life, man's life as the standard, my life as its purpose. If I ever surrender on that, I'm acting as my own destroyer, one way or another. Whether I know it or not, I'm acting as my own destroyer. As I say, I can make an innocent error, but I'd rather make an innocent error in the quest for life, right? And only, some guy said in an earlier interview that we had, if I were to postulate some supernatural dimension, and if that's where my values are coming from, then this whole life is just, preparation is just to be sacrificed in effect for that. No, this life is finite. This is all we got, folks. Every second of it is a precious, irreplaceable value to each of us whose life it is. And because a speck of dust is an absolute, because everything connects to my life, because the truth is the whole, nothing is irrelevant to the quest for my life. I have to have total integrity. My principles have to be the product of rational total integration, and I have to be 100% 24/7 full-time 365 full-time committed to it. I cannot give myself one little corner of exception. I can't give myself one moment of respite when it comes to my commitment to those principles, because my life matters. And if my life is the standard of my principles, then in effect, I'm acting against the needs of my life in one way or another. Now, so at the interview, they say, wow, Jim, it's a remarkable, you're willing to sacrifice in effect. And this is how most people even look at it. Jim, you're willing to sacrifice yourself for your integrity and for justice and for doing the right thing all the time. And my response is to them, that's not a sacrifice at all. Those are my values. Those are my needs. I know of no other way to achieve my life, but by perfection, by perfect devotion, by total commitment, 24/7, 365 devotion to rational principles. Now, this does not mean, of course, that I don't give myself time to relax and have fun with my friends. No, of course not. That's a necessary part of living too. But I'm not going to bend on any of my principles, not once, not for a minute, not for one little centimeter. I'm going to be as absolute about the needs of my life as reality is an absolute. There's no fudge room in reality for it, and it's life and death. And we kind of have to see ourselves as being on that tightrope, because if we were to cash in on our principles and compromise those, you may as well jump off. You may as well jump off, because that's my only guidance. That's my only way of managing this difficult and finite thing called life. It's got to be as absolute as the conditions of life themselves are. And they are. They are. If I compromise, if I negotiate on them, if I'm even willing to bargain and settle with someone, the Ayn Rand, makes many great comparisons here. The burglar breaks into my home and I start negotiating with him over the spoons. I've lost the whole thing. I may as well just hand them all over now, because he or someone else in the long run is going to get them anyway. You can't allow yourself to be a victim of that kind of extortion of the short range, getting back to causality and duty. You can't allow yourself to be a victim of sacrificing the long term for the short term. If you end up doing that, Ayn Rand is amazing on this. She says about honesty, neither love nor fame nor cash can even be of value if it's acquired by means of faking reality. So I get the money. Well, isn't the money of value? Nope. Nope. In fact, what you've done is you've just simply fueled your own self-destruction with that money. And that's the way I think and that's what makes the happiness non-contradictory at the end of the day. So that when I am enjoying life with my wife, and we smile with that contentment at each other, at all that we've been to each other, all that we've been through together, suddenly it's a non-contradictory joy without any little asterisks, any little exceptions or provisos, any ifs, ands, or buts. All of that is gone. It is a total, complete happiness without any sense of, well, I kind of should, the feeling. We all have that feeling. I kind of could have done better. I kind of could have, should have. No, 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 no. Woulda, coulda, shoulda doesn't count. Doesn't count here. We have to be devoted, and we have to habituate. That's the importance of moral character, by the way. Moral character makes it automatic, makes it the first go-to, makes it in most cases easy, because we know, okay, that's the right thing to do.
Makes it second nature.
It makes it second nature.
Who said that, Jim?
Aristotle. We're born with our first nature. We make our second nature. We make it through our own behavior, by making our own habits, by making our own habits of consciousness, our moral character. We turn ourselves, as Ayn Rand says, man is a being of self-made soul. And the most important thing that any of us do, most important value that any of us create, is our own moral character. And when you're loyal to a character that you are proud of, in that sense, as I say, that and that alone can create that experience of non-contradictory joy without any kind of proviso or exception to it. That total sense of satisfaction, a deep sense of satisfaction that comes from achieving your long-term goals. That's happiness. And if you've never experienced it, my friends, I can only tell you that only being a moral person, only by considering principles rationally, only by considering your purpose in terms of the long-term needs of your life, only by seeing yourself as worthy and able of achieving that, are you capable of that kind of non-contradictory joy that Ayn Rand talks about, one without one little shadow of doubt, hesitation, or I could have done better, or it should have been different. No, I'm perfect, and my perfection made that possible, and I deserve this joy, and I will give it to myself without hesitation.
And that, Jim, is the transformative power of objectivism. Jim, thank you so much. Thanks for allowing me to call the audible. Where can people find you?
Well, here, of course, for some reason, you
keep popping up.
I keep popping up, but I also do podcasts with the Ayn Rand Center, United Kingdom. And so you can see me. I do. If you're a member, it costs to be a member there. But if you're a paid member, you can get all kinds of things. I do courses on U.S. Constitution. We cover all of Leonard Peikoff, the philosopher Leonard Peikoff's courses, and we cover daily issues. I'm also on social media. I'm at Facebook, especially, answering questions almost every day.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Leibowitz. Till next time.